almost everybody on this stage is willing to admit is their favorite clean energy source. Many clean energy sources work together. We help make that conversation of working together include our favorite clean energy source, nuclear power. You are currently sitting in the Net Zero Nuclear Green Zone Pavilion here in the Energy Transition Hub. For those of you who have not been to COP before, the fact that we have a Net Zero Nuclear Pavilion here of this beauty and this generous size, yet a giant Korea hydro and nuclear power booth towers over us like a looming nuclear power plant. This is something that has never occurred. This is extraordinary. Several days ago, the presidency of COP hosted the first ever official Blue Zone event celebrating the role of nuclear energy and declaring it as essential for meeting net zero goals. This is, again, absolutely unprecedented. There's a lot of cynicism out there about everything. Pick a topic, there's cynicism. There's cynicism about COP as a waste of time. There's cynicism about advocacy as any kind of thing that can make a difference. I am incredibly proud to bring to you today a panel filled with people who have made small gestures, sometimes a lot of them, and occasionally some large gestures, and have fundamentally altered the way our world is going to end up in sometimes already now, sometimes 5 and 10 years, and we're seeing those results unfold. Then next to us, we have Sophie Francis Smith of Washington, D.C., who is also from one of the nuclear heartlands of the world, Knoxville, Tennessee, and will be talking to us about youth advocacy and policy. Sarah, tell us a little something about yourself. I want to know how you ended up in nuclear in a place where it's not unknown. People know about nuclear. It's famous for nuclear, meaning it's not like some exotic thing like these folks who discovered it and then went crazy for it.
Sure. So I'm from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, but my entree to nuclear was actually, miles away in the country of Jordan.
If I may just say, Oak Ridge, Tennessee is one of the largest, oldest, and most famous and outstanding nuclear laboratories on planet Earth, and she's from that town.
And somehow I grew up there my whole life without hearing about nuclear at all. And so I traveled to Jordan. I have a policy background, not an engineering one, and I'm studying water resource rights in Jordan. And it comes up on my radar that using nuclear energy for desalination is a really great application of nuclear energy.
So when that happened, when you heard this, so far from home, you heard this, did it make you re-examine your life? Not as in your choices, but home, Oak Ridge. Did you look at Oak Ridge, like look up your hometown on Wikipedia, or what was the discovery process?
Absolutely. I finished out my time in Jordan. I did a research fellowship at the Jordan Atomic Energy Commission studying economic feasibility models, and then I went home to Oak Ridge. And I said, what does the local context look like? And I looked at what the prospects were for SMRs in Tennessee. In my local
SMRs?
For small modular reactors. That was back in 2018. They were a nascent technology. Neither Jordan nor TVA or Oak Ridge had any actual prospects yet. Fast forward 5 years now, TVA has just, entered into this historic partnership with Ontario Power and GE to pilot a first-of-a-kind SMR in 3 countries to share the risk across 3 countries.
Any of them in Oak Ridge?
TVA is handling one of them outside of Oak Ridge.
So, a bunch of full circles happening here. You were born in one of the global historical hotspots for nuclear, one of the few places where nuclear is entering its 4th generation. You had to go across the entire world to hear about home. You're now in D.C. Did that lack of knowing about your home inform the way you talk about nuclear to people who have also not heard about nuclear?
Great question. I do think it created a lens for the way that I view net zero. So I think I would have been on board with this concept of we need clean energy, we need a world where every community has access to safe, reliable, affordable, clean energy. I don't know that I would have specifically included nuclear in that. And then my experience seeing what it could do for a community in Jordan, what it could do for a community in my hometown, what it could do for local communities around the US and around the world, that really did change the lens and ultimately informed, that was my undergrad, it ultimately informed the graduate degree that I got as well, which is a science and technology policy degree.
So this is practical part. Could you tell us a little bit about how you decide how far is advocacy, how far is activism, and where you define the professional and personal lines?
So I think a really great answer to this is that I think youth nuclear advocates should see themselves as part of the solution when it comes to policy making and policy implementation. One thing that I think is really important is for youth to understand the federal and state and local ecosystem of policy tools that are available to them. So, for example, in the U.S., we know that the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law have galvanized historic amounts of finance and funding for clean energy writ large, but nuclear power is included in that. And so I think, for example, nuclear advocates understanding what that means on a federal level and then being able to implement that on a local level to speak to their local state level decision makers.
That is an excellent point, Sarah. So I like to think that I'm fairly informed in nuclear energy. I'm doing it 364 and a half days in the year. I take a half day off for New Year's. I'm pretty obsessed with policy. I'm trying to figure out how to stop nuclear closures, get it built. I come to COP. I have incredible people that I can ask for information like all of you. And it was only a few weeks ago that I learned what the Inflation Reduction Act truly had in it for building the technology that I come and shout about on stage at COP. I think you've said something incredibly important. So you were naming policies and acts, and it sounded a little bit like, you know, the policy speeches we're going to hear. But you've said we have, in part thanks to high government officials strongly advocating for nuclear, the richest pot of money going towards nuclear as clean energy that America has ever seen. And I like to think I'm informed. And what you're saying is, if you're truly wanting to be an advocate, you're truly wanting to have a role, the lack of information even about your home or even about something that's very important to you can be vast, accidental. Maybe you should know, but you don't. You're saying that a youth advocate can be a central part of the process as nothing more than explaining policy that's already there to get done what you want.
Yes, exactly. If I can add to that very practically for an applied example, if you understand the tax credits within the Inflation Reduction Act, if you say, you know, there's $6 billion to keep reactors at risk of closing, if we say there's $6 billion of that in the Inflation Reduction Act, you can go to your local utility and inform them about that. They're probably aware of it, but if you push it, it's going to come up on their radar. You might not have the opportunity to meet with the Secretary of Energy, but you probably can get a meeting with the president of your local utility.
I love that. And by the way, I've seen that happen. If I had had a Sarah to tell me that years before, I think we would have been even better, even faster, may have saved even more reactors. That was an outstanding contribution, and I know we'll have questions afterwards. So what I'm going to have is Sarah have a final statement. Sarah, leave us with some thoughts.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm looking forward to Eric's opera at the end. My final thought is in regards to this conversation we were just on in terms of youth involvement and voices with state-level decision makers. So Tennessee, for example, the Tennessee governor signed an executive order advancing nuclear power earlier this year, and that order created a state advisory council for nuclear power. And that advisory council is staffed by industry leaders, stakeholders, government officials, Tennessee General Assembly members, but there's no youth on the council. And so I think one thing that practically would be really helpful in terms of getting community buy-in and youth voices is to put a youth engineer or a youth policymaker on councils like that. That's my last point.
I love it.